The courtroom fell silent as I walked in. My daughter rolled her eyes, my son looked down, and the judge revealed my millionaire secret. But to get there, I first had to lose everything. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Carol Davis. I'm 67 years old, and my entire life was built around one thing: my family. This Tuesday morning, as the sun barely began to creep through the worn-out blinds of my small apartment in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago, I woke up with the same knot in my stomach that had been tightening for weeks. My phone rested on the nightstand, its cracked screen reflecting the dim light. I picked it up with trembling hands, the same hands that for decades had cooked thousands of meals, sewn school play costumes, and scrubbed other people's floors so my children would never go hungry. The blue veins stood out under my skin, spotted by sun and time, reminding me I was no longer the young woman who arrived in this city with a baby in her arms and another on the way, fleeing a marriage that was consuming me. I opened my text messages. The last one I sent to my daughter Sarah said, "Honey, the doctor says I need an endoscopy. Can you come with me on Thursday?" I had sent it 3 days ago. 3 whole days. The read receipt confirmed she had seen it. But there was no reply. Not a "yes, Mom." Not a "let me check my schedule." Nothing. Just that digital silence that hurts more than any shout. I scrolled down through our conversation, torturing myself with the evidence of my own insignificance. All my recent messages were unanswered questions or ignored complaints. "How's my little grandson Ben? Did you get the transfer? Honey, want to have dinner on Sunday?" And from her, only curt replies when she needed something. "Mom, the washing machine broke. I need $500 for the school fees. Can you watch Ben this weekend?" I got out of bed with an effort, my knees creaking in protest. The apartment was small, barely 400 square feet that smelled of dampness, and the dried herbs I always kept hanging by the window. The cream-colored walls were filled with framed photographs. Sarah at her high school graduation, in that white dress I paid for by working double shifts at the textile factory. Daniel, my son, at his first communion in the suit I sewed myself because we couldn't afford to buy one. The grandchildren I barely knew because their parents were always too busy to visit. I made coffee on the old gas stove. The water boiled as I looked out the window into the building's inner courtyard, where Mrs. Peterson was already hanging her laundry. She waved, and I responded with a smile I didn't feel. How many times had I pretended to be fine when I was falling apart inside? The coffee was bitter, like everything lately. I sat in the only chair that didn't squeak and pulled out my little account book. That blue hardcover ledger my mother gave me 40 years ago, which had survived 3 moves, 2 floods, and decades of noting every dollar that came in and out of my life. The pages were filled with numbers in my shaky handwriting. April 2024. Transfer Sarah. Washing machine, $500. March, transfer Daniel, car repair, $1,000. February, Ben's school fees, $600. January, loan to Sarah for Florida vacation, $2,000, pending payment. I added it up mentally as the lump in my throat grew larger. In the last 6 months, I had given them over $8,000. $8,000 from my meager Social Security check of $850 a month, supplemented by the cleaning jobs I found here and there. Houses of families in Lincoln Park and River North who paid me $100 for 6 hours of scrubbing floors on my knees. And what had I gotten in return? Not one visit when I had pneumonia last winter. Not a single "thanks, Mom" that sounded sincere. They didn't even include me in the family photo they posted on Facebook on Mother's Day. Because according to Sarah, there were too many people and you didn't fit in the frame right. The doorbell rang, startling me. I spilled a drop of coffee on my worn-out robe, the one with faded flowers that was the only thing I wore in the mornings because why get dressed if no one was coming to see me? I opened the door expecting the utility guy or maybe Mrs. Peterson, but it was the mailman. "Carol Davis?" he asked without really looking at me, as if I were just another name on his endless list. "Yes, that's me." He handed me a manila envelope, the official kind that never brings good news. I signed for it with hands that already sensed disaster. I closed the door and stood in the tiny hallway, staring at the envelope as if it were a snake about to strike. The return address read, Family Court of Cook County. My fingers trembled so much I had to sit down before opening it. I tore the paper carefully, that absurd care you take even when you're opening the letter that's about to destroy what little dignity you have left. I unfolded the pages. The words danced before my eyes. Petition, partition of property during life. Plaintiffs, Sarah Davis and Daniel Davis. My children. My own children were suing me. I kept reading even though every word was a knife. They were requesting the division of my apartment. This apartment I bought with the severance pay from 20 years of working at the factory. This space that was the only thing I had left in the world. They argued that, to avoid future conflicts and inheritance problems, it was advisable to carry out the partition of Mrs. Carol Davis's assets during her lifetime. They were turning me into a legal procedure, an obstacle, something to be dealt with before it was too late. Tears fell onto the official paper, smudging the ink. These weren't tears of ordinary sadness. They were tears of that unique pain you only know when you discover that the people you sacrificed every second of your existence for see you as a burden, a nuisance, a resource to be managed. How many meals had I skipped so they could eat? How many nights did I work cleaning offices while they slept, to pay for the private school their father never wanted to afford? How many dreams did I bury? That baking course I wanted to take, that trip to the Grand Canyon I never made, those comfortable shoes I needed but never bought, to give them everything they asked for? I stood up as best I could and walked to the bathroom mirror. The woman who looked back at me was a ghost of who I used to be. Her hair, completely white, pulled back in a loose bun. Her eyes, puffy, surrounded by deep wrinkles carved by suffering. Her thin lips, always pressed tight from holding so much in. The simple dress, the kind you buy at a discount store for $10. Was this me? The woman who once danced at town festivals, who dreamed of being a teacher, who had plans and hopes? When had I become invisible? I went back to the living room and sat on the worn-out armchair I inherited from my Aunt Rose when she died. I held the lawsuit against my chest as if it were sacred, though it was the opposite. It was the final proof that I was worthless to them. I was just a bank account with legs, a property to be divided, a problem to be solved. The phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. Ma, I need you to transfer me $500 for Valerie's birthday. It's urgent. Not a, how are you? Not a, did you get anything from the court? Just the outstretched hand, expecting me, as always, to give. Something inside me broke at that moment. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screams or uncontrollable sobs. It was more like when an old wall finally gives way after years of bearing too much weight. An internal crack, silent but definitive. I sat there as the sun moved across the window, casting shadows that grew and stretched like accusing fingers. I thought about replying. I thought about calling Sarah. I thought about begging, explaining, asking why, but I did none of that. For the first time in 67 years, I stayed completely still, letting the silence teach me something I had ignored my whole life, that giving love to those who only take is not love. It's self-destruction. I didn't eat dinner that night. I went to bed early in my narrow bed, hugging the pillow as I had hugged my children when they were small and needed me. But they didn't need me anymore. They only needed what I could give them. And I, finally, was beginning to understand that maybe it was time to stop giving. The following days passed as if I were walking underwater. Every movement required a monumental effort. I would get up, make coffee, and stare at the phone, hoping one of them would call to explain, to apologize, to tell me it had all been a lawyer's mistake. But the phone only rang when they needed something. A week after receiving the lawsuit, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Go through the old boxes I kept in the small closet. I needed to remember who I was before I became this broken woman begging for crumbs of affection. The first box smelled of mothballs and time. Inside, I found yellowish photographs from when I arrived in Chicago in 1979, 22 years old and 6 months pregnant with Sarah. In the picture, my face was round and bright despite the fear I felt. I was wearing a floral dress my mother had sewn for me, and I was holding a cardboard suitcase with all my belongings. I remembered that day with painful clarity. I had just fled rural Indiana from Robert, the man who had promised me the world and only gave me bruises and humiliation. I arrived at the Greyhound station without knowing a soul, with $60 in my pocket and a baby growing inside me. I slept for 3 nights in the waiting area before a cleaning lady, a kind soul named Maria, took pity on me and took me to a crowded tenement building in back of the yards. That building became my home for 12 years. Sarah was born there, on a sweltering August dawn with the shouts of street vendors as the soundtrack. There was no hospital because I had no money. Just Maria, her expert hands, and her prayers. I pulled out another photo. Daniel was 2 and Sarah was 4. We were at Lincoln Park, in front of the fountain. I was wearing my uniform from the textile factory because I had rushed from my afternoon shift to take them to the park, just as I had promised. Their smiling faces broke my heart. When did those children who hugged me with adoration turn into the adults who were suing me? Daniel was born a year and a half after Sarah, also without a father. Robert never knew of his existence, and I preferred it that way. I raised my children alone, on a factory worker's salary that was barely enough for rent, bread, and beans. But they never lacked anything essential. They never went to bed hungry, even if I did. I remembered the Christmases I stayed up all night sewing rag dolls for Sarah and wooden cars for Daniel because I couldn't afford store-bought toys. They hugged them as if they were treasures. "You're the best mom in the world," Sarah would tell me, kissing my cheek. And I believed her because I wanted to, because I needed to believe all that suffering was worth it. I wiped away my tears and kept digging in the box. I found their report cards. Sarah was always brilliant, all A's and B's. Daniel was more restless, but just as smart. I went to every parent-teacher conference, always in the same mended dress because it was the only presentable one I had. The other mothers arrived with styled hair, designer bags, talking about their vacations in the Bahamas. I arrived with hands rough from washing other people's clothes, the smell of bleach ingrained in my skin, but with my head held high because my children ate 3 meals a day and had all their school supplies. That's what mattered. When Sarah turned 16, she wanted a big party like the ones she saw on TV. I worked for 6 months cleaning extra houses on weekends, saving every dollar. I took her to rent a pink dress that looked like a princess's gown, booked a small hall in the neighborhood, and even got a cousin to play music with his band. She danced with me, crying, telling me, "Thank you, Mommy. You're my hero." That night, I went to sleep with my feet bleeding from standing so long. But I was happy, completely happy because my daughter was happy. When did I stop being her hero and become her burden? I found the receipts. I had saved them all these years without knowing why. Receipts for tuition payments, uniforms, books, doctor's visits. Every piece of paper was evidence of a life dedicated entirely to them. When Sarah wanted to study business at a private university, I sold the few pieces of gold jewelry I owned, earrings my grandmother gave me, a chain I bought with my first paycheck, to pay for the deposit. "Mom, I promise that when I graduate, I'll pay you back every single dollar," she told me, hugging me. I believed her. She graduated 10 years ago. She never paid me back, but she kept asking for more. Daniel was different. He didn't want to go to college. He preferred to work as a mechanic. I was relieved because it meant one less expense, but he had other needs. His girlfriend Valerie got pregnant when they were 23. I was the one who paid for all the private hospital expenses because Valerie couldn't give birth in a public hospital like some charity case, in her own words. $2,000 I didn't have, but I got by cleaning offices at night after my factory shift. I almost fainted from exhaustion several times, but I did it because it was my first grandchild, because it was my family. When Ben was born, I was the one who took care of him for the first 2 years while Daniel worked and Valerie got her figure back at the gym. I changed his diapers, rocked him in my arthritic arms, sang him the same songs I sang to his parents. That child was like a third son to me. Now he's 9 and barely recognizes me when he sees me. I kept looking through the papers. I found the deed to the apartment. I signed it 15 years ago when I was finally laid off from the factory after 20 years of service. They gave me $40,000 in severance. With that money, I bought this place. 400 square feet in an old building in Pilsen. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had something no one could take away from me. Or so I thought. The day I showed the keys to Sarah and Daniel, the three of us cried, hugging in the empty apartment. "Mom, you did it," Sarah said. "Now you have your own asset, something you'll leave to us and your grandkids." Daniel added, "This place will always be yours, Ma. No one's going to take it from you." Now those same people wanted to divide it, split it up, take it from me before I was even gone. I got up from the floor, surrounded by photographs and memories. My knees protested with a sharp pain. I walked to the kitchenette and made a chamomile tea, the same kind my mother gave me when I was a sad little girl. The water boiled, and I poured it over the tea bag, watching the liquid turn a pale yellow. I looked out the window. Outside, life went on. Mr. Hernandez was selling tamales on the corner. Women were returning from the grocery store. Kids were playing street ball. Everything was the same, but I had changed inside. I picked up my phone. I had 7 unread messages, all from Sarah and Daniel. None mentioned the lawsuit. All of them asked for money or favors. Sarah needed me to watch Ben over the weekend because she was going to Lake Geneva with her friends. Daniel was asking if I could lend him $2,000 to fix his car. Valerie sent a message saying it was about time I thought of my grandchildren and helped them with the school tuition. I didn't answer any of them. That night, I took a lukewarm shower because the water heater wasn't working right. I put on my clean nightgown and went to bed early. Before turning off the light, I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I prayed. I don't know if anyone was listening, but I needed to speak, even if it was just into the void. "God," I whispered in the darkness, "I don't know what I did wrong. I gave everything I had. I was the best mother I could be. Why are they treating me like this? Why has the love I gave so purely turned into this nightmare?" There was no answer. Only the sound of cars passing on the street and the distant bark of a dog. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Images looped in my mind. Sarah rolling her eyes when I called to ask her to come with me to the doctor. Daniel hanging up on me because he was busy. Valerie telling me that, at my age, I should have everything figured out and not be a burden. A burden. That's what I was to them. After giving them life itself, after sacrificing every dream, every dollar, every moment of personal happiness, I was a burden they wanted to get rid of as quickly as possible. I hugged myself in that narrow bed and felt something I had never experienced before. A deep, abysmal, unbearable loneliness. Not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of discovering that the people you lived for never really saw you, valued you, or loved you the way you loved them. And in the midst of that suffocating darkness, a question began to form in my mind. How much longer was I going to let them destroy me before I fought back? Friday morning, I woke up to a text from Sarah that said, "Mom, I need you to come watch Ben today. Classes were canceled and I can't miss work. I'll pick you up at 8. It wasn't a question. It was an order, as always. I looked at the clock. It was 7:30. She was almost on her way. I got up with difficulty, my body aching from another night of poor sleep. I put on the first thing I found and made myself a watery coffee because the canister was almost empty, and I didn't have money to buy more until my Social Security check arrived. At 8:10, there was an insistent knock on the door. I opened it, and there was Sarah in her beige pantsuit, her leather bag, her designer sunglasses. She looked impeccable, successful, as if she had everything under control. Behind her was Ben with his Spider-Man backpack, staring at his tablet without even greeting me. "Oh, Mom, what took you so long?" she said, gently pushing Ben inside. "Look, I packed his lunch, but if he wants something else, just give him whatever you have. I'll be back around 7, 8 at the latest. Be good, Ben." She gave her son a quick kiss on the forehead and was already leaving when I stopped her. "Sarah, wait." She turned impatiently, checking her Apple Watch. "What is it? I'm late." The words got stuck in my throat. I wanted to ask her about the lawsuit. I wanted to scream at her. How dare she? How could she do this to me after everything? But the only thing that came out was, "Did you get my message about the doctor?" Sarah sighed with annoyance. "Mom, I already told you I'm very busy. Ask Daniel to go with you. Or take an Uber, can't you? You're not a child. You can go to your appointments alone." "But honey, it's an endoscopy." I need someone to pick me up afterward because they're going to sedate me. Oh, Mom, you're always exaggerating. My mother-in-law had one last month and took a taxi home by herself. It's no big deal. She gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder. I have to go. Take good care of Ben, please. And you know he's allergic to eggs. Don't give him anything with eggs. She left before I could reply. The door closed, and I just stood there, feeling something inside me harden even more. Ben hadn't even looked up from his tablet. "Good morning, sweetie," I said, approaching him. "Are you hungry? Want me to make you something?" "No thanks," he answered without looking at me, his fingers swiping across the screen. "What are you watching?" "Nothing." "Ben, honey, why don't you put that away for a little while and we can talk? It's been so long since I've seen you. How's school?" "Fine." I tried several more times to start a conversation, but it was like talking to a wall. This child I had cared for, who I had hugged, who I had soothed when he cried, now treated me like I was the cleaning lady. And the worst part was, that was probably how he was taught to see me. At noon, I made him some quesadillas. I opened the fridge and confirmed what I already knew. There was almost nothing left. A little bit of mozzarella, some tortillas that were starting to get hard, a can of beans. I heated up the griddle and made 3 quesadillas with all the love I could muster. "Ben, sweetie, come and eat." He shuffled over, still holding the tablet. He made a disgusted face when he saw the plate. "I don't want that. I want pizza." "Honey, I don't have money to order pizza, but these quesadillas are good. I made them with, we always have pizza at my house. My mom says you're poor because you don't work." The words fell like stones. I felt the air leave my lungs. A 9-year-old boy repeating what he heard at home, not understanding the venom he was spitting. "Sweetheart, I worked my whole life. I worked so your mom could go to school, so my mom says you're old now and you should have more money saved, that your apartment is ugly and small." Every word was a slap. I sat down across from him, trying to control my tears. "Ben, I bought this apartment with a lot of hard work. It's small, but it's mine. And I'm not poor. I've given a lot of what I have to help your mom and your uncle." He shrugged and pushed the plate away. "Can I watch TV? First, eat something, please." "I don't want to, and you can't make me because my mom says you're not the boss of me." I froze. So that's what I had become. Someone who didn't even have authority over her own grandson. A free employee, a favor they were doing me by letting me watch him. The rest of the day was an ordeal. Ben ignored my every attempt to connect with him. When I tried to show him pictures of his mom when she was little, he said they looked ugly and old. When I tried to play a game with him, he said he was bored. When I offered him cookies I had bought especially for him with my last few dollars, he refused them, saying, "Those are for poor people." At 8 o'clock, Sarah still hadn't arrived. I called her 3 times. No answer. I sent texts. Nothing. Ben was tired and grumpy. I was exhausted too, my legs aching from being on my feet all day trying to entertain a child who despised me. Finally, at 9:30, Sarah arrived. But she wasn't alone. She had 3 friends with her, all laughing loudly, holding bottles of wine. "Oh, Mom!" she yelled from the door, clearly drunk. "We're late because we went to a bar. Right, girls? It was amazing. Look, let me introduce you. This is Karen, this is Fernanda, and this is Lucy." The 3 of them greeted me with condescension, looking around my small apartment with poorly disguised pity. "Oh, Sarah, your mom is so cute," Karen said in a syrupy voice. "And her apartment is so cozy." Sarah laughed. "Yeah, well, it is what it is. Hey, Mom, can you do us a favor? Can you watch Ben tonight? We're going to continue the party at Fernanda's house, and I don't want to bring him." "Sarah, it's almost 10 at night. I'm tired. I've been with Ben all day." "Oh, Mom, it's just one night. I'll pick him up early tomorrow morning. Besides, what else do you have to do? It's not like you have plans, right?" She laughed, and her friends joined in. "Honey, I have a life too, things to do." "Like what?" Fernanda interrupted, crossing her arms. "Sarah told us you're retired. I don't get why you're complaining. It must be nice to have no responsibilities." Rage began to boil inside me. No responsibilities? I raised 2 children by myself. I worked until my hands were raw. I sacrificed every single day of my life. Well, Mom, that was your decision, Sarah said with absolute coldness, the alcohol making her say what she really thought. No one forced you to have kids. That was your choice, and now you can't hold it over our heads. Besides, look at everything we've given you. We call you, we visit when we can. You visit me? My voice trembled. Sarah, you haven't come to see me in 3 months unless you needed something. And when I come to your house, you treat me like an unwanted guest. Oh, stop being so dramatic. You're fine, you have your apartment, your social security. Some people have it worse. Look, Mom, Ben is staying and that's final. I'll be back tomorrow. Let's go, girls. And they left. Just like that. They left me with an exhausted child who started crying because he wanted to go with his mom. I spent a sleepless night on the armchair because Ben took my bed, listening to him sob and call for his mother. The next day, Sarah arrived at 2 in the afternoon. No apologies. No thanks. Just, let's go, Ben. Your grandma must be tired of you by now. The door closed, and I was left in the middle of my messy apartment. Dirty dishes in the sink, toys scattered everywhere, my body aching from sleeping poorly. I walked to the bathroom and saw myself in the mirror. I had deep, dark circles, messy hair, my face swollen from silent crying. But there was something different in my eyes. Something that wasn't there before. Rage. It wasn't the sadness I had felt these past days. It was pure, clean, justified rage. Rage against myself for allowing this for so long. Rage against them for taking advantage. Rage against the world for making me believe that being a good mother meant letting myself be destroyed. I picked up my phone and searched for something I never thought I'd look for. Free Legal Aid Chicago. I found a number for a legal assistance foundation. My hands were shaking as I dialed. Good afternoon, Legal Aid. How can we help you? And for the first time in weeks, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely alone in this. The appointment with the legal aid lawyer was the following Tuesday in a gray government building near the courthouse. I wore my most presentable clothes, a pair of brown dress pants I'd bought at a thrift store, and a white blouse that, though old, still looked decent. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun, and even put on a little lipstick I saved for special occasions. The building smelled of dampness and cheap disinfectant. There were endless lines of people waiting, mothers with crying babies, men with crumpled papers, entire families arguing in low voices. We all seemed to share the same expression. People who had reached the end of their rope and needed someone, anyone, to tell them there was still hope. Carol Davis? A voice called after almost 2 hours of waiting. I stood up on numb legs. Patricia Miller was a woman in her 40s, with thick glasses and a mountain of files on her desk. Her office was tiny, barely fitting her desk, 2 chairs and a metal filing cabinet. But her eyes were kind, and that was more than I had received lately. Please, have a seat, Mrs. Davis. Tell me, how can I help you? I took the lawsuit out of my purse with trembling hands. I handed it to her as if it were evidence of a crime, and in a way, it was. The lawyer read it in silence, her brow furrowing more and more. Your children want to partition your property during your lifetime, she murmured, reading. Do you agree to this? No, I answered firmly. I do not. That apartment is the only thing I have. I bought it with my severance pay after 20 years of work. It's my home. And have they been pressuring you to do this? The words came out like a waterfall I had been holding back for too long. I told her everything. The constant money transfers that left me without enough to eat. The disrespect. The humiliation. How they used me to watch grandchildren who treated me like a servant. How they were never there when I needed them, but always appeared when they needed something from me. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes wearily. Mrs. Davis, let me be honest with you. I see cases like yours every week. Seniors who sacrificed everything for their children and are now treated like ATMs or assets to be managed. She paused. Legally, you are under no obligation to divide your property in your lifetime. It is your right to keep it until your death. I felt immense relief, as if an anvil had been lifted from my chest. But, she continued, and that word chilled my blood, I need to ask you something important. Is the apartment deed completely in your name? Do they have any document signed by you that gives them rights over the property? I thought carefully. No, everything is in my name. I never signed anything giving them rights. Are you sure? No power of attorney? No letter promising to bequeath it to them? Nothing? Suddenly, a chilling memory surfaced. 2 years ago, when I had my gallbladder removed, Sarah had brought papers to me in the hospital. "Mommy, just sign here so I can pick up your prescriptions from the pharmacy," she had said. I was in pain, groggy from the anesthesia, barely able to keep my eyes open. I signed without reading. "Wait," I whispered. 2 years ago, I signed something in the hospital. My daughter said it was for medication. The lawyer's expression darkened. "Do you have a copy of what you signed?" "No, they never gave me one." "All right. We're going to request all documents related to your property. If they have something signed by you, it will show up." She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on mine. "Mrs. Davis, I need you to understand something. These types of cases can get very ugly. Your children will likely fight back. They will say things. They will manipulate. They will try to make you look like the bad guy. Are you prepared for that?" Tears started rolling down my cheeks, but I nodded. "Ma'am, I have nothing left to lose. My dignity is already on the floor. My health is failing. If I don't defend myself now, I'm going to die without even a place to rest my head." She nodded respectfully. "Then we will fight. I will represent you free of charge because you qualify for legal aid. But I need you to bring me every document you have. The deed, utility bills, property tax receipts, anything that proves it's your property. And Mrs. Davis," her voice softened, "stop giving them money, starting right now." I left that office feeling strange. On one hand, there was hope that someone would fight for me. On the other, I knew the war was just beginning. That afternoon, I received 4 texts from Daniel. The first said, "Ma, I urgently need you to deposit $800. It's an emergency." Second message, "Ma, answer me." Third message, "Are you okay? Why aren't you answering?" Fourth message, "I see you read the messages. You've gotten so rude." For the first time in my life, I didn't reply. I silenced the notifications and put the phone at the bottom of my purse. 2 days later was my endoscopy. I called an Uber to go to the hospital, just as Sarah had so dismissively suggested. The driver was an older man, Arthur, who told me about his family during the ride. "And are your kids meeting you there?" he asked innocently. "No, they're busy," I replied with the lie I had repeated so many times I almost believed it myself. "That's a shame. I take my mom to all her appointments. She's getting on in years and can't get around by herself anymore." His words were a knife in my heart. That's how it should be. That's how it is in normal families where love and respect are real. The procedure was quick but uncomfortable. When I woke up from the sedation, the nurse asked me, "Who should I call to come get you? You need someone to pick you up." I gave her Sarah's number, though I knew it was useless. As expected, she didn't answer. I called 5 times. Nothing. I tried Daniel. Voicemail. After an hour of waiting in the recovery room, feeling dizzy and vulnerable, I asked the nurse to help me call a cab. "Ma'am, you can't leave by yourself. You're still under sedation." "It's dangerous," she explained with genuine concern. "I don't have anyone else," I admitted, and saying it out loud broke me completely. The nurse, whose name was Monica, sat down next to me. "Hang on a minute. Let me talk to my supervisor." She came back 10 minutes later. "Look, my shift ends in half an hour. I'll drive you home. Don't worry, it's not far out of my way." I couldn't hold back the tears. This stranger was showing me more compassion than my own children. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because that's how my mom taught me, to take care of others, especially our elders." She smiled. "And because one day I'll be in your shoes, and I hope someone will help me too." Monica drove me to my apartment, made sure I got inside safely, and left me her number, in case you feel sick and need anything. When she left, I sat on my armchair and cried like I hadn't cried in years. I cried for the kindness of strangers and the cruelty of my own blood. That night, Sarah finally texted back, "Oh, Mom, sorry, I was super busy. Are you out of the hospital? Everything okay?" As if it were nothing. As if abandoning me during a medical procedure was of no consequence. I didn't reply. The next day, Daniel showed up at my door unannounced. He knocked insistently until I opened. He pushed his way in, agitated. "What's wrong with you, Mom? Why aren't you answering your messages? Why didn't you send the money?" I looked like an idiot to Valerie because I promised her I'd give her the money for whatever she wanted to buy. "Daniel, I don't have any money," I replied, tired. "What do you mean you don't? You get your Social Security check every month. That check is for food, for bills, for survival. I can't keep giving you what I don't have." His face twisted into something I didn't recognize. Pure rage. "You know what, Mom? I'm sick of your drama. You've always been like this, playing the martyr, the poor little victim. Do you know how many times Sarah and I have had to put up with your complaints? Oh, I'm sick? Oh, I'm so lonely? It's exhausting." "Daniel, I have never complained to you." "Of course you have. All the time. And now you're telling me you have no money when we know perfectly well you have this apartment that's worth a fortune. Do you know how much a condo in Pilsen costs? But you just hoard it like a miser while we struggle." "A miser?" I repeated, incredulous. "A miser for wanting to have a roof over my head? Whatever. I already talked to Sarah and we agree. It's time you were fair to your children. You're going to leave us this apartment anyway, so why not divide it now so we all benefit?" "Because it's my house, Daniel. My home. Then get something smaller. You don't need this much space. This could be split in two, and Sarah and I could live here or rent it out. Do you know how much rent you can get in this area?" I finally understood it with crystal clarity. I wasn't his mother. I was an investment, a piece of real estate, a resource to be exploited. "I want you to leave," I said with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. "What?" "Get out of my house. Now." He laughed in disbelief. "Are you kicking me out? Me, your son? You, the person who only sees me as a property to be divided. Yes, get out." He looked at me with a hatred I will never forget. "You're going to regret this. When you're old and sick and nobody wants to take care of you, you'll remember this day." And he left, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there trembling, but I was still standing. For the first time in 67 years, I had said no. The days following that slammed door were the quietest of my life. No texts, no calls. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them. And the most surprising thing was that, instead of feeling devastated, I began to breathe more easily. The apartment, though empty, felt more like mine than ever. But the calm didn't last. One afternoon, as I was returning from the grocery store with my 2 bags, I found Valerie waiting for me at the building's entrance. She was wearing a tight dress, high heels, and an attitude that screamed trouble. Behind her stood Sarah, with her arms crossed and the expression she always used when she was about to attack. "Hello, Carol," Valerie said with a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. She never called me Mom or Mrs. Davis, just Carol, as if we were peers. "Valerie, Sarah," I replied, trying to get past them, but Valerie blocked my way. "We need to talk to you. It's urgent. Now is not a good time. I have groceries and I need to—" "It's about Ben," Sarah interrupted dramatically. "About my son, your grandson. Or do you not even care anymore?" I felt the intended guilt trip, but this time something was different. This time, I could see the manipulation clearly. "What about Ben?" I asked, holding my ground. "He's depressed," Valerie said theatrically. "He cries every night asking why his grandma hates him. He says you rejected him, that you don't want to see him anymore." "That's not true. I never—" "Oh, really?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of Ben crying. "Look, this is what you caused with your selfishness. My son is suffering because his grandmother would rather have her apartment than him." The words were pure poison, designed to destroy me. And a month ago they would have succeeded. But now, after everything that had happened, after seeing so clearly how they had used me, something in me had hardened. "Sarah, the last time I watched Ben, he treated me like dirt. He told me I was poor, that my house was ugly, that I wasn't the boss of him. Where do you think he got those ideas?" Valerie rolled her eyes. "Oh, kids say things. You can't take them seriously." "And what about you, Sarah?" I continued, feeling the rage build. "You abandoned me at the hospital after my endoscopy. You didn't answer my calls. I had to ask a stranger, a nurse, for help, because my own daughter couldn't be bothered to pick me up. I already told you I was busy. I don't have to explain my life to you. Sarah shot back coldly. Of course not. But you also don't have the right to demand I give you my home. Valerie stepped closer, invading my personal space. Her expensive perfume made me dizzy. Look, Carol. Let's just lay it all out. Daniel and Sarah have been carrying you for years. They've given you money when you had none. They've included you in their lives. They've put up with your drama and depression. Given me money? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I'm the one who's been giving them money. Every month. For years. Those were gifts, not loans. Sarah said dismissively. No one forced you to give them to us. You chose to help your children from the goodness of your heart. You can't bill us for it now. Bill you? I'm not billing anyone. I just want to keep my home. Your home? Valerie let out a cruel laugh. Carol, let's be realistic. You're not going to live forever. That apartment is going to be theirs sooner or later. Why not now, when they really need it? Do you know how hard it is to rent? The prices they're charging? Then work harder. Save. Do what I did for 20 years to be able to buy my own place. Sarah stepped forward, her face twisting into something ugly. You know what, Mom? I'm sick of your victim act. It's always the same. Oh, I suffered so much. Oh, I sacrificed so much. Well, you know what? Nobody asked you to have us. That was your decision. And now we're supposed to pay you back for being born. I have never asked you to pay me for being your mother. Then act like a mother, Sarah shouted, and several neighbors peeked out their windows. Mothers give everything for their children. Mothers sacrifice without expecting anything in return. But here you are, clinging to an apartment while your own children struggle. Is that a mother's love? Tears threatened to fall, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. A mother's love doesn't mean letting myself be destroyed. It doesn't mean giving away the only thing I have left so you can have more comforts. They're not comforts, Valerie interjected. It's justice. You people, your generation, you cling to property while young people have nothing. It's pure selfishness. Selfishness? I repeated, feeling something inside me finally snap. But not from pain, from liberation. Selfishness is wanting a roof over my head? Selfishness is protecting the one thing I managed to build with my own labor? Then what is it that you're doing? What do you call trying to take a house from an old woman? You're not an old woman, Sarah screamed. You're 67. Stop playing the invalid. My mother-in-law is 72 and she still works. She's still useful. She still contributes to her family. Ah, so the problem is, I'm not useful enough. I don't give you enough. The problem, Valerie said, moving dangerously close, is that you're a selfish person who would rather see her children suffer than let go of a little control. Get out of my way, I said, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. It was firm, hard, final. Or what? Valerie challenged me. What are you going to do, Carol? Call the police? Accuse us of what? Wanting you to share with your family? I took out my phone and started recording. You are harassing me at the entrance of my building, pressuring me to give you my property. You are using a child as a tool for emotional manipulation. This is all being recorded. They both froze. Sarah tried to grab the phone, but I moved faster than they thought I could. If you don't leave right now, I'm going to show this video to my lawyer. And yes, I have a lawyer. The lawsuit you started now has a legal response. Sarah's expression changed from rage to something resembling fear. A lawyer? Mom, you can't be serious. We're your family. Family doesn't sue. Family doesn't harass. Family doesn't manipulate. I put my phone back in my pocket. And family definitely doesn't use children as weapons. You will regret this, Valerie hissed. When you need help, when you're sick, when you can't take care of yourself, you'll be begging us for help. And guess what? We won't be there. I'd rather die alone than live as your slave. The words came out with a clarity that surprised even me. Sarah opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. She looked at me as if I were a stranger. And maybe I was. Maybe the Carol they knew, the one who let herself be trampled and manipulated, had died. And in her place was someone new. Someone who had finally learned to stand up for herself. They left without another word, their heels clicking furiously on the sidewalk. Several neighbors had come out and witnessed the whole scene. Mrs. Peterson came over after they were gone. Carol, are you okay? Yes, Mrs. Peterson. I'm okay. For the first time in a long time, I'm okay. I always suspected those girls didn't treat you right. I've seen them show up demanding things and you always giving in. I'm glad you finally stood up to them. I went up to my apartment with shaky legs, but my head held high. I put away the groceries and sat in my armchair. The silence was absolute, but it wasn't the painful silence from before. It was a silence full of possibility. I took out my phone and sent the video to Patricia, my lawyer, with a message. This just happened. Can this be used as evidence? She replied in less than 5 minutes. It helps a great deal. This demonstrates harassment and undue pressure. I'm adding it to the file. Mrs. Davis, you are doing the right thing. Do not let them intimidate you. That night, I made myself a calming tea and sat on my little balcony, the small space where I had put 2 pots of geraniums. The city stretched out before me with its lights and constant noise. Millions of people living their lives, fighting their battles, carrying their own sorrows. And for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. I had found something I didn't know I had. My own voice, my own strength, my own worth. There would be consequences, I knew. This was just the beginning. But for now, in this moment, sitting on my balcony with my hot tea and my blooming geraniums, I felt at peace. Tomorrow, I would face whatever came. But tonight, just this once, I would let myself rest, knowing I had taken the first real step toward my own freedom. Monday morning arrived with a gray sky threatening rain. I got up early, not because I had to, but because I had slept better than I had in weeks. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. Something was different in the air, or maybe it was I who had changed. The doorbell rang at 9. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found a young man in a courier uniform holding a manila envelope. Carol Davis? Yes, that's me. Sign here, please. I signed with a trembling hand. The envelope was thick, official. I opened it as soon as I closed the door. It was the response from Daniel and Sarah through their lawyer. But it didn't come alone. It included new documents that chilled me to the bone. They had filed a counterclaim. Not only were they insisting on dividing the apartment, but they were now alleging that I owed them money. According to them, for years they had loaned me sums for my personal expenses and were now demanding repayment, $25,000. I read and reread the papers, unable to believe it. Every act of love I had shown, every dollar I had given them, they had twisted. According to this document, I was the debtor. I was the one who owed them. They attached bank transfers as proof, but they had manipulated them. Transfers I had made to them were being presented as loans they gave to me. I felt the floor move beneath my feet. I sat down before I could fall. How could they stoop to this? How could they lie so blatantly? The phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Carol Davis? A male voice asked, professional and cold. Yes. Who is this? This is Ernest Carrillo. I represent your children, Daniel and Sarah Davis. I'm calling to offer you an out-of-court settlement that would benefit both parties. I have nothing to discuss with you. I have my own legal representation. Ma'am, please understand this can get very unpleasant. My clients have evidence that you have been acting irrationally. There are testimonies from neighbors confirming erratic behavior. Furthermore, your age is a factor the judge will consider. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of the reality. A long, draining trial is not in anyone's best interest, especially a person of your age and condition. But my clients, out of filial love, are willing to reach an agreement. You sign off on the division of the apartment, and they will drop the lawsuit for the debt. Everyone wins. Everyone except me, who ends up with nothing. Not nothing, ma'am. You would have a proportional share of the property's value. Plus, your children commit to supporting you with basic expenses. Like they always have, right? I couldn't help the sarcasm. Tell your clients I'll see them in court. I hung up before he could reply. My hands were shaking so much I had to put the phone down. I immediately called Patricia. Patricia, I just received— I know, she interrupted. I got a copy. Mrs. Davis, this is a very common pressure tactic. They want to scare you into giving up. But I have good news. I got your bank statements from the last 5 years. And And every single transfer you made to them is documented. The dates, the amounts, everything. There is no way they can prove those were loans to you. Also, I found something else. 2 years ago, your daughter did have you sign a document, but it was a simple power of attorney that has since expired. It has no legal standing for a property claim. I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost fainted. So, I can win this? You can, and you will. But Mrs. Davis, I need you to be prepared for what's coming. They are going to try to discredit you. They will find witnesses to say horrible things about you. They will try to paint you as a bad mother, as someone unstable. Can you handle that? Tears rolled down my cheeks. Ma'am, they've already called me everything. They've already made me feel worthless. What more can they take from me that they haven't taken already? Your dignity, and that is what we are going to defend in court. The days that followed were a nightmare. Sarah began a social media campaign, not mentioning me by name but making it clear who she was talking about. When a mother chooses money over the well-being of her own children, she wrote on Facebook, adding a broken heart emoji. The comments filled with support for her, from people cursing those selfish mothers. Daniel was worse. He told the entire extended family that I had become senile and ungrateful, that I was denying them their inheritance out of pure spite from a bitter old woman. Cousins I hadn't seen in years called to tell me how disappointed they were. How could I possibly treat my children this way? Carol, your kids have given you everything, my cousin Rosemary said over the phone. You raised them to be good people, and now you're denying them what's rightfully theirs. Rosemary, they're suing me to take my home. Oh, don't exaggerate. They just want what's fair. You've lived your life. Now let them live theirs. I hung up without saying goodbye. Even the family that supposedly loved me had chosen a side without even hearing mine. One afternoon, coming back from the supermarket, I found graffiti on the building's wall. Selfish old hag. The letters were red, aggressive, final. Mr. Hernandez from the tamale stand was scrubbing it off when I arrived. Don't you worry, Mrs. Davis. I saw who did it. It was some young guy who drove up in a fancy car. I took a picture of the license plate in case you need it. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. My voice broke. Look, ma'am, I don't know what troubles you have with your family, but you've always been a good neighbor. You always buy tamales from me, even though I know the stairs are hard for you. You always say hello. That says a lot about a person. That small kindness broke me more than any insult. I went up to my apartment and cried for hours. Not tears of sadness, but of helpless rage. How far were they willing to go? The answer came 2 days later. I received a call from the St. Raphael's Senior Care Facility. Mrs. Davis, we were contacted by your daughter Sarah, who is concerned for your well-being. She's requesting information about our permanent care services for seniors with cognitive decline. Cognitive decline? I don't have any. That's what she informed us. She said you are exhibiting erratic behavior, memory loss, and an inability to manage your own affairs. She asked for quotes and availability. I hung up, trembling with fury. They wanted to lock me away. They wanted to make me seem insane to justify taking everything. This was their new strategy. I called Patricia Miller immediately. Patricia, they're trying to make me look crazy. They called a nursing home saying I have cognitive decline. Perfect, she replied with a calmness that surprised me. That plays right into our hands. We're going to request a psychological evaluation. A professional will certify that you are completely lucid and capable. That will destroy their argument. Besides, trying to have someone committed against their will without a real medical cause is illegal. This strengthens our position. When is the hearing? In 2 weeks. November 15th. Mrs. Davis, that day is going to be tough. They'll all be there. Your children. Probably other relatives. Witnesses. I need you to stay strong. No matter what they say, no matter how they try to provoke you, keep calm and tell the truth. The 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Patricia had me review dates, amounts, events. She taught me how to answer trick questions, how not to let myself be intimidated. You have done nothing wrong, she repeated over and over. You are simply defending what is yours. I went through the psychological evaluation. The psychologist, Dr. Ramirez, put me through dozens of tests, questions, and exercises. At the end, she took my hand and said, "Mrs. Davis, you are completely lucid. Your memory is excellent. Your reasoning skills are intact. What you have is situational depression caused by familial emotional abuse. But mentally, you are perfectly capable of making your own decisions." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I got up at 4 in the morning and started cleaning the apartment, even though it was already clean. I needed to keep my hands busy. I washed dishes that were already clean. I swept floors that were already swept. Anything not to think about what was coming. At 7, I started getting ready. I put on my best clothes. A navy blue dress I had bought years ago for a wedding and rarely wore. I did my hair carefully, pulling the white strands back into an elegant bun. I put on a little makeup, a bit of lipstick, a touch of powder. When I saw myself in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. The woman looking back had a straight back, a firm gaze, her jaw set with determination. This wasn't the broken Carol who had been crying for weeks. This was someone new, someone stronger. Patricia picked me up at 9. We drove together in her old car toward the courthouse. The Chicago traffic was hellish as always, but that day, every minute in the car was one less minute until I had to face what was coming. "Ready?" she asked when we finally reached the courthouse parking garage. I looked at the gray, imposing, cold building. Inside were my children, waiting to destroy me publicly. Inside was a judge who would decide if I deserved to keep the only thing I had. "Ready," I replied, and for the first time in a long time, I truly was. The courthouse hallway smelled of disinfectant and old paper. Our footsteps echoed on the tile floor as we walked toward the hearing room. My heart was beating so hard I was sure Patricia could hear it. Then I saw them. Sarah was sitting on a bench in the hall, dressed in an elegant black suit, her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless but with strategically visible dark circles to look distressed. Beside her, Daniel wore a gray suit he had probably rented for the occasion, trying to look respectable. Valerie was there too, in a dress that screamed money and an expression of superiority that made my stomach turn. When they saw me arrive, Sarah stood up dramatically. "Mom," she said in a trembling voice, loud enough for others waiting in the hall to hear. "We can still fix this. It doesn't have to come to this. We're family." I didn't answer. Patricia had warned me. "Don't talk to them. Not a word. Anything you say can be used against you." "You see?" Sarah said to Daniel in a broken voice. "She won't even speak to me, her own daughter, and she treats me like a stranger." Daniel approached, his face a mask of false concern. "Mom, please, think about Ben. He misses you. He cries for you every night. Are you really going to destroy your family over pride?" Every word was a hook designed to snag on my guilt, on my motherly love, on everything that had kept me a prisoner for years. But this time, I could see it clearly. This time, I didn't take the bait. "Mrs. Davis, let's go in," Patricia said firmly, guiding me toward the courtroom door. "Look how that lawyer controls her," I heard Valerie say. "She can't even think for herself anymore." The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Cream-colored walls, windows with gray blinds, and at the front, a wooden bench where the judge would preside. There were wooden pews, like in a church, separated by a central aisle. On the right side, our side, there was just Patricia and me. On the left, Daniel, Sarah, Valerie, and their lawyer, Mr. Carrillo, a man in his 50s with an expensive suit and the expression of a shark. Behind them, in the public gallery, I recognized a few faces. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, Sarah's neighbors, even some of Daniel's co-workers, all looking at me as if I were the villain of this story. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Morales entered, a man in his 60s with gray hair, rimless glasses, and a completely unreadable expression. We all sat when he did. Case number 2847-2024. Davis, Sarah, and Davis. Daniel versus Davis. Carol. Petition for partition of property and claim for restitution, the clerk read in a monotone voice. "Very well," the judge said, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Carrillo, state your client's position." My children's lawyer stood with the confidence of someone used to winning. "Your Honor, I represent two devoted children who are only seeking to protect their mother and secure their family's future. Mrs. Carol Davis, age 67, is the owner of a property in Pilsen, which, according to a recent appraisal, is valued at approximately $200,000. Hearing my apartment's value stated like that, as if it were just a number, made my stomach churn. My clients, the lawyer continued, have noted with concern a decline in their mother's ability to manage her affairs. Erratic behavior, questionable financial decisions, social isolation. Out of filial love, they are requesting an early partition of the property to avoid future conflicts and to ensure their mother is properly cared for. Furthermore, he added, pacing like an actor on a stage, my clients have documented loans made to Mrs. Davis over the years, amounting to $25,000, which she refuses to acknowledge or repay. Ms. Miller. The judge turned to Patricia. Your position. Patricia stood up calmly. Your Honor, my client is a lucid, fully capable woman who worked for 20 years to purchase her property with her own severance pay. There is no cognitive decline whatsoever, as proven by the psychological evaluation we have submitted. What does exist is a systematic pattern of economic and emotional abuse by her children, who for years have extracted money from my client through manipulation, and now seek to appropriate her only asset. Those are serious accusations, the judge said, frowning. We have proof, Patricia replied. Bank statements showing that Mrs. Davis transferred significant amounts to her children monthly, testimonies from neighbors who have witnessed the mistreatment, and a recent video where the plaintiffs harass my client at her home. The judge nodded, taking notes. We will proceed with the testimonies. Call your first witness, Mr. Carrillo. Sarah was the first to take the stand. She swore to tell the truth with a trembling hand and a broken voice. Her performance was perfect. Ms. Davis, her lawyer began, describe your relationship with your mother. We've always been very close, Sarah said, dabbing at tears I knew were fake. I adore her. She's my mom, the woman who gave me life. That's why what's happening hurts so much. Can you explain why you are here today? Because we're worried about her. She's changed so much lately. She's become paranoid. She accuses us of horrible things. She refuses our help. We consulted with doctors who told us this is common in people her age. That's why we want to protect her, to make sure she's well cared for. And the loans you made her? For years, we helped Mom financially. When she needed money for groceries, for her medication, for emergencies. We never kept track because she was our mother. But now she's saying it never happened, that we asked her for money. It's part of her confusion. Every word was poison wrapped in honey. I clenched my fists under the table, feeling the rage rise in my throat. Patricia placed her hand on mine, a signal to remain calm. Your witness, Ms. Miller, the judge said. Patricia stood up, a folder in her hands. Ms. Davis, you say you have always been very close. When was the last time you visited your mother without needing something from her? Sarah blinked, confused. I visit her often. Often? Can you provide specific dates? I don't keep a calendar of visits to my own mother. I see. And when was the last time you accompanied your mother to a medical appointment? Sarah hesitated. She's independent. She can go by herself. Even when she specifically asked you to accompany her to an endoscopy that required sedation. I was busy that day. Busy at a bar with your friends while your mother was recovering alone in a hospital? Patricia pulled out a paper. I have the testimony of Nurse Monica Ruiz, who had to personally drive Mrs. Davis home because you would not answer your phone. Sarah's face turned red. That was a misunderstanding. And is it also a misunderstanding, the video where you and your sister-in-law harass your mother at the entrance of her building, demanding she give you her property? I just wanted to talk to her. I have the video right here, Your Honor. Patricia handed a flash drive to the judge, with audio where they clearly pressure her, insult her, and threaten to take her grandson away if she doesn't give in. The judge played the video on his computer. From where I sat, I could hear our voices. Valerie's voice saying, "You're selfish." Sarah's voice shouting, "Mothers give everything for their children." My own voice, firm despite the fear, saying, "I'd rather die alone than live as your slave." The silence in the room was absolute when the video ended. Anything else? The judge asked Patricia. Yes, Ms. Davis, you claim you lent your mother money. Do you have receipts, contracts, any proof of these loans? It was family. We didn't do paperwork. How convenient. On the other hand, I have here 5 years of bank statements that clearly show your mother transferring between $300 and $800 to you monthly. Were those also loans? Sarah didn't know what to say. Her face shifted from feigned sadness to real anger. You may step down, the judge said. Daniel was next. His testimony was similar: false concern, veiled accusations about my mental health, denial of any mistreatment. But Patricia dismantled him just as easily, showing text messages where he demanded money from me, recorded calls where he insulted me, and testimonies from neighbors who had heard him yelling at me. Valerie tried to testify that I was a threat to my own grandson, but Patricia presented the testimony of Ben's teacher, who confirmed the boy had never mentioned any problems with his grandmother, and had, in fact, said in class that, "My grandma is poor because my mom says she doesn't work." Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the stand on trembling legs. I swore to tell the truth with a steady hand, even though I was shaking inside. "Mrs. Davis," Patricia began in a gentle voice, "tell the judge how you bought your apartment." And so I did. I told them about 20 years working in a textile factory, about the double shifts, about hands ruined by chemicals and labor, about the day I was laid off and received $40,000, about searching for months until I found that small apartment that was mine. Why is that place so important to you? Because it's the only thing I've ever achieved that no one gave me. It's the proof that I am worth something, that my life's work meant something. My voice cracked, but I continued. It's my home, the only place in the world where I am the owner of my own existence. Did you lend money to your children, or did they lend it to you? I gave them money for years. Tuition, rent, emergencies, whims. Everything they asked for. I thought that's what a good mother did. And did they ever pay you back? Only with contempt. The opposing lawyer tried to make me seem confused, paranoid, vengeful, but I answered every question calmly, with facts, with dates. I was no longer the scared Carol. I was the Carol who had found her voice. When the testimonies were finished, the judge announced, "I will review all the evidence presented. I will issue my ruling in 48 hours. This court is adjourned." We left the room in silence. Outside, Sarah looked at me with pure hatred. Daniel didn't even look in my direction. It didn't matter, because for the first time, I had seen myself, and what I saw was a woman who deserved respect. The longest 48 hours of my life began the moment I left the courthouse. Patricia drove me back to my apartment, and before she left, she told me something I'll never forget. "Mrs. Davis, no matter what the judge decides, you've already won something more important. You've won yourself back." I couldn't eat that night. I made a chamomile tea and sat on my balcony, watching the city lights. My phone had exploded with messages, some from furious relatives calling me ungrateful and a bad mother, others from neighbors who had heard about the trial and sent their support. Mrs. Peterson left a container of casserole at my door with a note. "So you're not alone, even if you'd rather be." Mr. Hernandez stopped by the next day with his tamales. "Mrs. Davis, these are on the house. Don't pay me, and I want you to know the whole neighborhood is with you. We heard what your kids did. What a disgrace." "Thank you, Mr. Hernandez." My voice broke. "You don't know how much that means. Look, ma'am, I watched my own mother go through something similar with my brother. He wanted to take everything while she was still alive. In the end, my mom had to set boundaries. It was painful, but necessary. Sometimes self-respect is worth more than blood." I spent those 2 days cleaning, cooking, doing anything to keep my mind busy. I took down all the old photographs and organized them in a box. I didn't want them on the walls anymore. They weren't happy memories. They were proof of an illusion I had believed for too long. On the morning of the third day, Wednesday, November 17th, my phone rang at 10 o'clock. It was Patricia. "Mrs. Davis, the judge has issued his ruling. We need to be at the courthouse at 3 p.m. for the official reading." And I didn't dare ask. "Come, and we'll hear it together." The hours until 3 were pure agony. I changed my clothes 3 times. I did and undid my hair. I drank coffee that tasted like nothing. Finally, at 2:30, I went downstairs to wait for her. We arrived at the courthouse 20 minutes early. This time there were more people in the hallway. Daniel, Sarah, and Valerie were already there, along with their lawyer. I also saw my cousin Rosemary, a few other cousins, and their neighbors. They all stared at me as if I were a monster. Sarah's eyes were puffy from crying, or from pretending to cry. Daniel looked furious, his jaw clenched. Valerie shot me a look of such pure hatred I could almost feel it physically. No one spoke. The silence was thick, heavy, charged with expectation and resentment. At 3 o'clock sharp, we were called in. The room was the same as before, cold, impersonal, intimidating. Judge Morales entered, and we all stood. "You may be seated," he said in a neutral tone. He opened a thick folder and adjusted his glasses. "I have carefully reviewed all the evidence presented, the testimonies, the documents, the recordings. This is a case that, unfortunately, is becoming increasingly common in our society. Adult children seeking to appropriate their parents' assets prematurely." Sarah let out a loud sob. The judge ignored her. "The plaintiffs, Ms. Sarah Davis and Mr. Daniel Davis, allege cognitive decline in their mother to justify an early partition of assets. However, the psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Ramirez demonstrates that Mrs. Carol Davis is in full possession of her mental faculties. There is no medical or legal basis to declare incompetence." I felt I could breathe a little easier. "Regarding the alleged debt of $25,000, the judge continued in a severe tone, the plaintiffs presented no documentary evidence. No contract, no receipt, no promissory note. On the contrary, the defendant presented 5 years of bank statements demonstrating consistent transfers from Mrs. Davis to her children, not the other way around." Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Furthermore," the judge looked up and stared directly at my children. "The video presented by the defense shows a disturbing pattern of harassment and psychological pressure. The phrases, 'You're going to regret this,' 'When you need help, we won't be there,' and 'You're selfish,' are not the language of filial love. They are veiled threats." "But, Your Honor," Mr. Carrillo began. "I am not finished." The judge cut him off firmly. "I am also deeply concerned by the plaintiff's attempt to contact nursing homes for individuals with cognitive decline, presenting false information about their mother's mental state. That is not only ethically reprehensible, it is potentially criminal." Sarah turned pale. "Therefore," the judge closed the folder with a sharp thud, "I rule as follows. First, the petition for partition of property during life is denied. Mrs. Carol Davis is the sole owner of her property, and will remain so until her death, or until she, in full use of her faculties, decides otherwise." I felt my soul return to my body. Second, the counterclaim for debt is denied, as there is no proof of its existence. Furthermore, I am ordering the plaintiffs to cease any and all harassment, pressure, or manipulation of Mrs. Davis, under penalty of facing charges for domestic abuse. The judge paused and looked directly at my children with an expression of profound disgust. And third, and I say this more as a human being than as a judge, I have seen many cases in this courtroom, but few have outraged me as much as this one. Mrs. Davis worked for 20 years. She sacrificed for you, and your gratitude is to try and strip her of the only thing she has. That is not filial love. That is cruelty. But Sarah tried to protest through her sobs. "Silence," the judge commanded. "You had your chance to speak, and you presented only manipulation and lies. Now you will listen. A mother does not owe her children an inheritance in her lifetime. A mother has no obligation to sacrifice herself to the point of destruction, and her adult children have no right to demand anything beyond the basic respect owed to any human being." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I had tears rolling down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief, of justice, of validation. "This court is adjourned." He banged the gavel. "And Mr. and Ms. Davis, I strongly recommend you reflect on what you have done here. You didn't just lose a lawsuit. You lost your mother." We left the courtroom in the midst of chaos. I heard Valerie yelling at Daniel, "I told you we should have hired a different lawyer." Sarah sobbing uncontrollably, their lawyer trying to justify the loss. Patricia hugged me outside the courthouse. "We did it, Mrs. Davis. We did it. No, I corrected her. I did it. I finally learned to defend myself. When I returned to my apartment that afternoon, everything looked different. The walls were the same, the furniture was the same, but the air was different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't crushing me. It was my space, legally, emotionally, and spiritually mine. That night, I received a text from Sarah. I hope you're happy. You destroyed your family. When you're old and alone, remember this day. I replied for the first time in weeks. I am already old, Sarah. And I've discovered that being alone is better than being surrounded by people who use me. Take care. And I blocked her number. I blocked Daniel's. I blocked Valerie's. One by one, I removed the people who had turned me into a shadow of myself from my life. The next few days were strange. I woke up several times in the middle of the night expecting a demanding text, an urgent call, but there was nothing, and that nothing was liberating. One day, Mr. Hernandez invited me to have breakfast at his stand. Mrs. Davis, I want you to meet someone. It was a woman his age, Esperanza, who sold flowers at the street market. She also had to set boundaries with her family. I thought you two would get along. We became friends. Esperanza invited me to her quilting circle on Wednesdays. There I met other women, Martha, Rosa, Connie, all with similar stories, all learning to live for themselves after decades of living for others. A month after the trial, I was at a local market in Pilsen when I saw Ben. He was with a nanny, not Sarah. He saw me and ran toward me. "Grandma!" he shouted, hugging me tightly. The nanny came running, apologizing. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Don't worry," I told her. I looked at Ben. "Hello, sweetie. How have you been?" "I miss you, Grandma. My mom says you're mad at us." I knelt down to his level. "I'm not mad at you, Ben. I could never be, but I needed to take care of myself. Can I come visit you?" I looked at the nanny. She gave a subtle shake of her head. "When you're older and can decide for yourself, you will always be welcome," I told him. I hugged him tight, memorizing the moment, and let him go. 3 months later, I signed up for a baking workshop I had always wanted to take. I learned to decorate cakes, to make cookies with professional techniques. I discovered I had a talent for it. 6 months later, I started selling my desserts at the local flea market. Not out of necessity, but because I enjoyed it. Because it was mine. Because it was something I chose for myself. A year after the trial, I was on my balcony drinking coffee when the doorbell rang. It was a courier with a letter. I opened it curiously. It was from Sarah. A handwritten letter, 3 pages filled with her messy script. "Mom," it began, "I don't know if you'll read this or just throw it away. I wouldn't blame you if you did. But I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. You were right." I kept reading, my heart pounding. "I've realized a lot of things this past year. About how I treated you, what I did to you, all the pain I caused. I have no excuses. I was selfish, cruel, manipulative. I saw you as a resource, not as my mother. And now that I've lost, I understand what I truly lost." Tears began to fall on the paper. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to come back because I know you shouldn't. I just want you to know that you were right to defend yourself, and that if one day, some distant day, you were willing to give me a chance to know the real woman you are, not the mother I thought owed me everything, I would be grateful." The letter ended with, "I love you, even if I don't deserve to. Sarah." I put it in a drawer. I didn't reply. Maybe one day I would, maybe not. But for the first time, that decision was entirely mine. 2 years passed since that day in court. 2 years that felt like a whole new life, as if I'd been reborn at 69. My apartment no longer felt like a prison of painful memories. I had transformed it, little by little. I painted the walls a soft yellow that reminded me of my childhood home in Indiana. I bought plants that now filled every corner. Pothos hanging from the ceiling, succulents in the window, a small lemon tree on the balcony that Esperanza had given me. The baking business had grown more than I ever imagined. What started as selling cookies on Sundays at the flea market became a steady stream of orders. Cakes for birthdays, cupcakes for events, decorated cookies for baby showers. My hands, the hands my children had called old and useless, now created beauty that people happily paid for. Esperanza, Martha, and Rosa had become more than friends. They were my chosen family. We met every Wednesday to quilt and every Friday for coffee at the Pilsen Coffee House, an iconic neighborhood spot where tourists and locals mingled under the trees. "Carol," Martha said one afternoon as we were quilting, "you have to tell the younger women your story. So many of them need to hear that it's possible to set boundaries." "Who would want to hear the story of an old woman who almost lost everything?" I replied with genuine doubt. "All of them," the three said in unison. It was Esperanza who convinced me to give a talk at the local community center. Family abuse isn't just about hitting, Carol. It's also what they did to you. And there are women of all ages who need to know they can fight back. I agreed, terrified. The night of the talk, I expected to find a half-empty room. Instead, there were over 50 people. Women of all ages. Some young with babies in their arms, others middle-aged with tired expressions, and many my age with eyes that recognized my story before I even told it. "My name is Carol Davis," I began, my voice trembling, "and for 67 years, I believed that being a good mother meant disappearing. Today, I want to tell you how I learned I was wrong." I told them everything: the neglect, the manipulation, the trial. When I finished, there was a complete silence. Then, a young woman raised her hand. "Mrs. Davis, how did you know when it was time to say enough? I have a mother who asks me for money all the time. She makes me feel guilty if I say no. And I don't know if I'm being a bad daughter or if I have a right to my own life." My answer came from the heart. The moment is when you give so much that you're left empty, when your generosity becomes your own destruction. Love doesn't mean dying for someone. It means living in a way that honors both of you. After that night, more women approached me. They shared their stories. Adult daughters supporting parents who never worked and now demanded luxuries. Mothers caring for adult children who refused to leave home. Grandmothers raising grandchildren while their own kids found themselves. I started giving regular talks. The community center, the library. Once, even at a university where social work students wanted to learn about economic abuse within families. My life had filled with purpose. Not the purpose of serving others until I was nothing, but the purpose of sharing what I had learned so others wouldn't have to suffer so much to find it out. One September afternoon, exactly 2 years and 4 months after the trial, I was in my kitchen decorating a tres leches cake when someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and froze. It was Daniel, but this wasn't the furious Daniel who had slammed the door. This Daniel had deep, dark circles. He had lost weight, and in his eyes was something I had never seen before. Genuine shame. "Hi, Mom," he said in a hoarse voice. My first instinct was to shut the door. My second was to scream at him everything I had held back for years. But I did neither. I just stood there, looking at him. Can I come in? Just for 5 minutes. If you want me to leave after that, I'll go and I'll never bother you again. I promise." Something in his tone made me step back, letting him in. He stood in the center of the living room, looking around as if seeing the place for the first time. "You painted," he said softly. "It looks nice. Brighter." "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked without sitting, keeping my distance. He took a deep breath, as if preparing for something painful. "I came to tell you something I should have said 2 years ago. You were right about everything." The words hung in the air between us. "Valerie left me," he continued, his voice breaking. 6 months ago. She said I'd become a bitter person, obsessed with the money we should have had, that I was destroying Ben with my attitude. She took him to Austin to be with her family. I only see him 2 weekends a month. I felt a pinch of satisfaction, but also sadness. Not for him, but for Ben. "And Sarah?" I asked. "She's just as miserable as I am. Her husband threatened to divorce her if she didn't stop obsessing over what you stole from us." "Yes, Mom, that's how we thought. That you stole something that was ours. As if your life, your work, your sacrifice was an investment that you owed us with interest." He sank onto the armchair without asking, burying his face in his hands. The therapist Valerie made me see before she left made me see everything. He made me read my own texts, listen to my own words. Mom, I was a monster. I treated you worse than a stranger on the street. So now what? I asked harshly. You come here to apologize to make yourself feel better? So your mommy can tell you everything's okay and you can sleep at night? No. He looked up, tears rolling down his cheeks. I came because Ben asked about you. He said, Dad, why doesn't Grandma love us anymore? And I realized that I had taught him to see the one person who truly loved him without expecting anything in return as the bad guy. He stood up, walking to the window. I came to tell you that I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I came to tell you that you had every right to defend yourself, that I wish you had done it sooner. And I came to tell you, his voice broke completely, that I am so sorry for making you feel like you were worthless when you are the most valuable thing I ever had. I finally sat down, feeling my own tears well up. Do you know what the worst moment of all this was, Daniel? What? When you said you were sick of my complaints, when I had never, not once in my life, complained to you about my sacrifices, when you called me a miser for wanting to keep a roof over my head. That day, I understood you didn't see me as your mother. You saw me as an obstacle between you and money. You're right, he whispered, and I'll live with that shame for the rest of my life. We sat in silence for a long time. I looked at my flour-dusted hands. He looked out the window at the Pilsen streets we once walked together when he was a boy. I can't forgive you yet, I finally said. I don't know if I ever can, but I can tell you this. I'm glad you understand. I'm glad you're in therapy. And I'm glad Ben has a chance to grow up with a father who learned this lesson, even if it was in the most painful way. Daniel nodded, wiping his tears. Can I write to you sometimes? Not asking for anything, just to let you know about Ben, so that if one day you wanted to see him, we'll see, was all I could offer. One day at a time. He left after that. When I closed the door, I leaned against it, processing what had just happened. I didn't feel the triumph I had imagined. I felt something more complex, a mix of sadness for all the lost time, and a tiny seed of something that might, one day, grow into healing. That night, in my group chat with Esperanza, Martha, and Rosa, I told them what happened. And how do you feel? Esperanza asked. Confused, sad, but also free. I don't have to carry the weight of their regret anymore. They're carrying their own, as they should. That's the difference, Martha wrote. Before, you carried their mistakes. Now, everyone carries their own. That's justice. She was right. In the following months, Daniel kept his word. He wrote every couple of weeks telling me small things about Ben, that he got an A in math, that he was learning to play the guitar, that he sometimes asked if his grandma would ever want to come to his soccer game. I didn't answer every message. Sometimes I did, with short replies. That's great. Tell him congratulations from me. Maybe one day. I kept the distance I needed to protect myself, but I left a small crack open, not for him, but for the boy who was not to blame for his parents' mistakes. I heard nothing directly from Sarah, but Mrs. Peterson told me she'd seen her at church praying. She looks different, Carol. More humble. As if life taught her a lesson. My baking business continued to grow. I hired Monica, the nurse who had helped me on the day of my endoscopy, to help with large orders. She had recently been widowed and needed the extra income. We became partners and friends. You helped me when no one else would, I told her when I offered her the partnership. And you're giving me a second chance when I need it most, she replied. This is how the world should work. On my 70th birthday, my friends from the quilting circle threw me a surprise party in the community center garden. There were over 100 people, neighbors, customers from my business, women who had attended my talks, even some who had traveled from other neighborhoods to be there. Mr. Hernandez gave me a huge bouquet of flowers. For the bravest woman in Pilsen, he said with tears in his eyes.